That's chartered accountant. I shall leave it to my much more informed colleagues on the Commerce Committee to comment.
Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Mr. Speaker, the last speaker made a point which I thought was a very, very valid one. And he said, I think in his days as a chartered accountant, he had a lot of small business people who came in with the shoebox or the briefcase or whatever with the monthly receipts, and they handed them to the accountant and they said, please sort it out, I must, guilty as charged. When I was a small business person, I was blessed with a very good accounting friend who I would take the shoebox into with all the receipts, and he was a very, very good accountant. He would sort it out and make sure that I acted legally, which is important, and paid my tax and met all my particular obligations and gave me good advice in respect of what I was required to do. This bill we will support to Select Committee, as my colleague David Parker has said, because this bill, I think, at its essence, the theme of this bill could be described as having the balance between good regulation and not excessive regulation. And what we need to ensure that we have good regulation, and I'm wondering tonight, actually, if the Minister for Small Business, the Honourable John Banks, I use honourable advisedly, but the Honourable John Banks, who is actually, because this bill is about reducing essentially compliance costs as well, and we know that the mission of the Small Business Minister, his mission in life, his mandate with his portfolio, of course, is to reduce compliance costs. We asked, that's right, who said that? That's right, they all said that. The Associate Minister said that, and that's true. The difficulty is, sir, we're still waiting. And this is relevant because my colleague David Clark, this is relevant to this legislation. He's a person who has a memory and doesn't have amnesia, Mr. Banks. He can remember his own name, unlike you, the member, sir. And Mr. Woodhouse mentioned an interesting theme because he mentioned cabbage boats in his speech. And I know that I have to comply with standing orders, sir, so I know that I can't move outside the bill unless the previous speaker has sort of drawn other themes in. Oh, yes. But anyway, the issue is this, sir, that this is a good piece of legislation on the face of it. We want to ensure, of course, that this is there is an appropriate level of regulation, but not excessive. And I'm the opposition small business spokesperson, sir. And what I think, and as a former Minister of Small Business, what we all seek is to reduce compliance costs on the commercial sector. If you can reduce compliance costs, you become more efficient, more competitive. So I wait with interest, sir, unless the four headless horsemen have got there before me and got to the Minister of Small Business before me, the sort of walking dead, as to whether Mr. Banks will get up and take a call and give his view on this legislation. Because I think this is a fair attempt, colleagues, a fair attempt. This is a weighty piece of legislation. This is an important legislation because what it will encourage is it will give access in a more simplified and transparent form to financial information to the ordinary punter. So I wait with interest. This is a real and genuine attempt, I think. We don't know if it's a valid attempt to reduce some compliance costs of business. Unlike Lazarus over there, sir, the resurrection has happened, whose only achievement in the Parliament is to introduce a piece of legislation that expunges 31 acts that don't exist. That's the contribution. He's laughing, he does. It's a nervous laugh. It's the sort of nervous laugh you get when you're handed a bag of dough and you pass it on to your campaign manager and you pretend you don't know. You pretend you don't know who gave it to you and what was in it. It's a nervous sort of little laugh. It's the sort of nervous laugh, I think, sir, you have when the courts, sir, when the courts call you on the 12th of December to answer a few questions that you wouldn't answer to journalists, you wouldn't answer in the Parliament, and he's on the... Sir, I think you should call the Zambuck, sir, because I think the Minister for Small Business was having a difficulty.
Get back to the debate.
Well, he's on his cell phone. You're the Speaker.
That's right, and I've requested that the members speak to the first reading.
Oh, absolutely, and I am, sir, because as part of the purpose of this, the main purpose of this bill, sir, and I'll read it in case we need reminding, is to improve the financial reporting system by making all general purpose financial reporting consistent with the primary objective of the financial reporting system. The objective is to provide information to external users who have a need for an entity's financial statements but are unable to demand them. right? That's also reducing compliance costs. And it is germane, sir, it is germane to ask the Minister of Small Business, wherever he may be, under whatever desk or piece of carpet, maybe he's under the lambskin over there, if he will contribute to this debate, because this is very, very important. The heart of this piece of legislation, as a colleague of mine suggested to me before I stood up, is a balance, as I've said, between good regulation and excessive regulation. Good regulation is transparent. The entities who have to use that legislation know what it means, they know how to comply with it. And actually, if we'd had good regulation perhaps around, say, the Local Government Donation Act, there's a good example, sir, then certain people and a certain person in this chamber would have known exactly what it meant, wouldn't have... well, it was clear. I'm not a lawyer. My colleague David Parker is a learned lawyer, and he said, well, that regulation was clear. I suppose what it sets as an example, and Mr Banks could talk to this in great detail, is that if legislation and regulation is presented in a form where it is user-friendly, then there is a higher chance of compliance. Higher chance of compliance. But that also means, of course, that requires a bit of intelligence on behalf of the user. And in the case of the Minister of Small Business, we know that's a wee bit of a dicey concept. This is important legislation. I'm interested in also asking the Minister as to where that puts us in line with Australia. Where that puts us in line with Australia. Because one would not, as Mr Parker said, want to overly burden capital-raising companies, as they are small companies, as they are attempting to grow with excessive regulation. We know across the ditch there is a scheme of arrangement which I think may be slightly better than ours in terms of allowing companies to flourish and growth. Of course, in Australia, they have a massive capital fund because they have compulsory superannuation, because the place is awash with capital and companies can grow and prosper because they have access to that. But the question I would raise and what we'd like to look at in the Select Committee is where does this put us in line with our Australian competitors? Because we need to be on a parallel basis to them. We may want to be to have a higher standard than them, but we don't want to be put in a position, our particular companies, where we have greater regulation, excessive regulation, attempting by its objective to do good things, but effectively hog-tying our companies and penalising our companies as opposed to, and advantaging, by definition, those in Australia, because they are our closest trading partners. And whether it be the law or banking or commercial enterprise, governments of all shades have attempted to ensure that regulation is consistent where possible, or to transition that regulation where possible, so that we are consistent with Australia, to make it easy for our companies, or easier for our companies to do business. So I welcome this legislation. I think we're going to have to put it under significant, Mr Speaker, significant scrutiny. I would wager that it is a good attempt, a fair attempt to try and do some good work in the commercial sector to reduce compliance cost. I have to say in concluding, sir, this is a weighty piece of legislation as opposed to the bunkum and the despicable attempt by Mr Banks to bring in legislation which effectively was piffle. Even his coalition colleagues over there, he's back, even his coalition colleagues knew when he stood up and pronounced that his legislation was groundbreaking. It was going to sort of, people, small businesses would throw petals at Mr Banks as he walked down the street of Auckland, celebrating what a wonderful gentleman this was, what wonderful things he had done for small business, until they realised that Great Mary says, yeah, Mayor that trebled the debt in 3 years, what a cracker he was, Mr Spendthrift, until those small businesses realised, of course, that all he did was repeal 31 acts that don't exist. But I say to Mr Banks, I welcome his call on this bill. We all welcome his call on this bill. We also welcome the date of the 12th of December, not because the House is going to rise, sir, but because our wonderful judiciary, in its own inquisitorial fashion, will ask some very penetrating questions of a Member of Parliament, and it's all BS. Well, we'll see what happens there. I've got a feeling that the 4 judicial headless horsemen, sir, may be after Mr Banks. They may just get him, and we may have a vacancy in this Parliament.
Dr Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise on behalf of the Green Party to speak to the first reading of the financial report.